Hello and welcome to another Shooting the Shit. We are live here. It's a Grow Traffic production, but it's not really a Grow Traffic production because it's two of the Grow Traffic team, although one of them's not bloody here. And then Marisha, who isn't part of Grow Traffic, but she's part of our Shooting the Shit crew. So every week we're going to get together and we're just going to spend sort of 35, 40 minutes having a chat about the stuff that really matters to us. Hannah is running late, so we waited 7 minutes for her and we decided we're not going to wait anymore, but she is on her way. She's just messaged say she's on her way. But we've got Marisha. Say hello, Marisha.
Hi, Marisha. Hi.
Hi. And today we're going to talk about language in the workplace and clothing in the workplace and what that means for women and what it means for men, and is there a difference, and are there double expectations, double standards, different expectations placed on people. Hannah is here, she's joining. There we go. Are you okay?
Sorry.
Started without you. I was just doing the introduction, say that today we're going to talk about language in the workplace and clothing in the workplace, and are those two things different for men and women, and are there different expectations on them? So that's that. Do you want to say hello, Hannah?
Hello. Sorry I'm late. I was talking to two plumbers
All right, lovely.
using gender non-binary language.
Right.
Fully dressed.
There we go. So let's start with language. Let's start with language in the workplace. We touched on this very briefly in, I think it was last week's session that we did. Mm-hmm. And we were basically touching upon the fact that we speak about working mums, but you never hear anybody talk about working dads. And whenever we discuss women, we say, a woman aged 32, mum of two, and we bring into the conversation the fact that she has children and what age she is. And we don't do that for men. We don't worry about how old a man is or how many children he's got or whether he's working and bringing up children. So why is that, and why have we got these double standards? Marisha, what do you think?
Oh God, that's like straight in there, isn't it? Why? I don't know.
Marisha.
I have a lot of problems.
I think it's a thing that's been going on for a long time, I guess, really. And I think it opens up like so many other questions and so many other things. But I think it ultimately comes back to, preconceptions and preconceived ideas about women, when they should be married by, when they should have children by, at the same time as doing this, that and the other, it's almost like sometimes it's like, shock horror, she's got a job still and she's not at home birthing children every 5 minutes.
Career woman, that's what it's like. It's like you're defined by not having children.
Yeah, so you're kind of stuck either way, aren't you? There's a label anyway, whatever you are as a woman, it feels like.
Yeah.
And that seems to be accepted as well, actually, and it's in the newspapers, isn't it? There's definitely the, so-and-so of X age, mum of two or mum of five or whatever. And actually judgments are made very quickly off the back of those things too. Actually, if it's a large number, there's like, straight away, there's almost like
I wonder if they've all got the same dad.
Yeah.
They're on benefits.
There isn't there? Yeah.
There absolutely is. It is crackers. But as well as you say, though, it is so ingrained that, I found myself doing it. I found myself talking about career women or, working mums. I think of myself in those terms. I think of myself, I've defended the way that Grow Traffic has a lone worker and a flexi working policy by saying that we are all working mums.
Don't ever call me that.
But not all of us are working mums, are we? Why do we do it? Hannah, what do you think?
I think because women in our society are defined by maternity. Like, you are a mother or you're defunct, and if you're a mother, that is your primary function, and then therefore that supersedes absolutely everything else you could do. I read just a tweet, I think it was, or something on Reddit, just a throwaway thing someone had put that said, something like, Carol is a respected scientist and has been published in multiple, research papers, but Emily's school friend, she's Emily's mum and no one's ever bothered to learn her name. And it's true, like, you know, we don't go around the school gates going, so what do you do? What do you do? But it's just expected that you are mum first. And if you're not mum, then you're broken or there's something wrong with you.
The schools perpetuate that because, you know, everything in the school day is obviously within the school day, but, you know, like parents' assembly will be at 9:15 and you are the bad mum if you're not there for your child. You know, if your child's getting a certificate or if it's their birthday and you're not there, you know, you're the bad one. Well, where are you? Like, well, actually, I've got a job. I can't
working. Yeah.
be there.
At my daughter's dance, they often will make announcements to the room of parents who are waiting, and my husband takes Naya to dance as often as I do because I'm working, because I'm a bad mum. And like they'll say, "Can I just have your attention, mums?" And he's like, you know, not the only man in the room, but he's assumed to, you know, they just assume that it's all the mums. And at showtime, it's only women that can take the children backstage and get them ready for the show because, you know, naturally all men are paedophiles, apparently.
I think that's awful. I think that really winds me up, that.
It's the council that apparently do it, that men aren't allowed backstage. But anyway, but I think the other thing that really pisses me off is this term mumtrepreneur, because it implies that you are part-time, not as aggressive, fitting it around your child, you know, your children's life. And there's nothing wrong with working part-time and fitting your life around your children's life and, you know, going to assemblies. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But women are expected and men are not expected and not appreciated when they do it. And when they do it, it's, oh, aren't you good? Aren't you good for looking after your children? And like, Dave would love a bit of recognition for the amount of, you know, he's a 50-50 parent and that's how it should be. And it shouldn't be he's looking after his child, he's taking his child to dance so his wife doesn't have to. And it pisses me off. So what was the question?
That's a good one though, isn't it? We're talking about language. It's that thing of when men say like, oh, I'm babysitting tonight.
Yeah, I'm like, who is this for? What kids have you got tonight? It's on my own. What?
What's your hourly rate? How much do you charge your own kids? But apparently, I don't know if you read that there was an article with Tony Blair a couple of weeks ago in the newspaper.
Yeah.
He was talking about how he'd never done childcare, never done housework, never been a part of
it.
Yeah, he's rich enough, isn't he, to pay nannies and cleaners and stuff. So I can kind of see why. Well, I still wouldn't be bloody bragging about it, would you?
Boris Johnson, probably not the worst thing he's ever done.
Yes, Boris Johnson said that he'd helped to change some nappies, helped his wife by changing some nappies. And again, it's that whole thing of, hang on, is this not your baby?
Yeah.
Why?
Again, not the worst they've ever done. But you would never say, oh, this woman, like the mother is helping the father look after the child. And
no.
But I don't think it's the patriarchy. It's not men that are doing it. It's just the accepted status of men and women in society that's perpetuated by both genders. Yes. It's not, and it disadvantages both genders and the children. It's definitely not men forcing women into this. It's also women. Like I remember when Naya was a baby and Dave was looking after her, and Dave literally had her and was feeding her and stuff, and Naya got a cold, so Dave went and got her a cardigan and put the cardigan on her, and my mum came rushing up to me. Dave's just put a cardigan on Naya. Didn't even have to ask Hannah where it was.
I love that you were so excited then. I was engaged in that story then.
That's why our faces. But you're right. I mean, as I said before, this is how I think about myself and our lives and stuff. It is that, that it's so ingrained in us. But when you think about, the history of the workplace, it was only sort of 40, 50 years ago that as soon as a woman got married, she left the workplace. And that was that you didn't have working women.
Yes, but that was for such a short period of time, up until that point. Like during the Industrial Revolution, women would work as much as men. And before that, in agriculture, women would work as much as men. Like it was such a short period of our history that women were taken out of the workplace and into home and were able to stay home and look after the children. And yet it's just not got out of our psyche. It was probably for the same amount of time that happened since. And it's just not, I just don't understand why it's become so ingrained in our language and our culture.
I don't actually. Marisha, in your working experience, have you seen a lot of this? Is because you were mentioning last week about how, you know, if there are mums that have got young children, they're it's sort of assumed that they'll have Christmas off and they'll have New Year off and they'll have the birthdays off, and the ones that the men or the women who haven't got children are kind of expected to pick up the slack and do that. So is that something that follows through quite often, do you think?
I think it is, in all honesty, but I think there's an acceptance that men have responsibilities as well when it comes to kids, and actually there's also the men that want to be. You know, I think the generation that I'm in, if you like, dad was at work from 6 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. You know, that still exists, obviously, in some sectors and in some places. But where I've been working and where I've been involved with people, there's a lot more acceptance now of actually men want to be involved in their kids' lives. They don't want to miss all of this time and by working all the time. It's as simple as that. You know,
I wonder if... Sorry.
Oh, go on.
No, sorry, there's a lag. I thought you finished.
Shut up. I want to get in. Go on.
Let me talk.
But I wonder if they ever did, you know, if they ever were happy to miss out on their children's lives, or if that was just what they had to do because their wives weren't allowed to work.
Well, there is, isn't there? There's evidence that it was. I mean, that's why we have toxic masculinity. There is evidence that it is and was just as damaging to men. I mean, think of all those generations of kids that grew up without a father. You know, dad was just somebody who was there on a Sunday afternoon for a brief period whilst he was reading the paper, and, you know, the rest of the time you never saw them. So fathers just didn't figure in children's lives or anything. That, you know, it was very, very segregated in terms of, here is the workplace and this is where men are, and here is the home and this is where women and children are, and never the twain shall meet.
I think there's a lot to be said for popular culture as well, kind of reinforcing all of that kind of stuff. You know, one of my favourite movies now, not just like, you know, as a kid, Mary Poppins, yeah? So there's the nanny, isn't there? The dad plays this guy that's like stressed out of his mind all the time, hasn't got time for the kids, is not interested in the kids, mum's at home looking pretty and all of that kind of stuff. And actually, it's just, oh yeah, okay, that's just how life is, you know? And yeah, I think it's breaking down, I guess, the barriers for that. And I think, you know, when I had a team of people, you know, it was more obvious, I guess, that the guys were more involved in life because, yes, the wives worked or they didn't drive, or there were other factors that meant that they had to be involved and couldn't easily say, you know, no, essentially. Because they had to. So I think that kind of forced a lot of the involvement.
Do you know, I think as well, there is this cultural belief that men are feckless knobheads when it comes to their own children. Like, I was thinking about Mary Poppins, and we were watching the new one the other day, and the storyline it's essentially the same, except obviously the Banks parents are dead, spoiler alert. And I know, sorry to break it to you.
I can't watch the new one because I'm just like, I can't do that.
I wouldn't bother Marisha, it's not great. But the what's he called? The boy, the Banks boy. What's his name? Anyway, the Banks boy. What? Michael has got children of his own now, and his wife has also died. And Jane has to help him, like, look after the children because he's such a feckless bellend that he can't look after these two children on his own. That he's managed, you know, his wife must have done everything, and he can't manage the finances, and he can't look after them, and he doesn't know where they are, and he's not doing the grocery shopping, and he forgets to feed them and stuff. And I think there is this whole, you know, oh God, I'll just do it myself because men are useless, like looking after their own children.
It's in loads and loads of children's films and modern ones as well. Like it was in Nanny McPhee as well, isn't it? That basically, if the father is left in charge of the children because the mum dies, he is not going to cope on his own.
Hell breaks loose.
Some sort of nanny or elderly sister, spinster sister, or somebody has to come in and rescue the poor man, because he cannot possibly look after his own children.
And it's just such a false narrative, and it undermines men in the eyes of the children, and it adds pressure onto women to have to do more. And I don't understand how the hell we got here and why it's being perpetuated.
No, I don't understand. You're right. When you put it into the context of history and that timeline, you know, it was such a short period of time that women weren't allowed into the workplace. Do you know what I found really interesting, though? I don't know if you saw it on the BBC News last week, I think it was. They were interviewing a woman. She's an epidemiologist, I think, and her child came in whilst they were on the Zoom call, and this was on like BBC National News, and started talking to the newsreader about where she should put her unicorn. And so the newsreader was in the middle of doing an interview on the BBC News, and he was saying, like, oh, I think the unicorn should go on that shelf. And it made international news around the world. And I sat there and I thought, why in 2020 are we surprised that children have invaded, you know, the workspace, essentially, which is what it was, the hallowed workspace, and children have come into it, and this is still headline news. And I think still, you know, I've taken Leon to my networking events, and it's like an oddity. Most people will say, oh, I can't come networking this week because it's half term, or my child's ill, or if your child's ill, I get it. But, you know, I've got a child to look after. And I'm like, well, bring it. Why can we not bring children into the workplace? If women are in the workplace, you know, women and men, you have to do childcare as well. Why are we still having this such defined roles between the worlds, basically?
Because children are horrible and a nuisance.
Well, there is. Yeah, you can never get any bloody work done when they're not around, can you?
No, I bet there's loads of parents out there who, you know, I've been surprised, quite pleasantly impressed at how well my kid has adapted. I was teaching her how to do quotes the other day. She does the adding up. So, you know, some adapt really well.
Start them off young.
Yeah. But we should start them off young, because it's important for both little boys and little girls to see both parents in the workplace being professional, and then coming home and shifting roles and being a parent, regardless of the gender. They shouldn't see women, you know, kind of phoning it in and ringing like the school and kind of doing part-time work and working shorter hours, and then the dad, you know, being big professional, going out in a suit. And, you know, it shouldn't be Mary Poppins. It shouldn't be our experience. Well, not our experience, because our parents both work full-time, but you know, a lot of our generation's experience was the mother predominantly does the housework and the home care and the home stuff, and the job is the bit on the side, and the dad does the job and the home is the bit on the side. Children should be seeing that both genders or both parents in a relationship, regardless of gender, do equal amounts of each and can shift gears.
Yes.
You have to.
Absolutely. And so do you think if we are to change the workplace for the better, if we think about how we're going to come out of COVID and we want to make the workplace a more accessible sphere for both women and men, is that what we're going to have to do? Are we going to have to do things like enabling children to come into the workplace, maybe having creches or areas in the workplace where children can spend some time if a parent needs to do a bit of work, or enabling more people to work from home? I mean, Marisha, where you work, would that work in your office?
I think it would, but also wouldn't. And I kind of, you know, I guess the here and now for me in terms of how to address that and how to kind of change is actually just making it acceptable. Because actually, like, you know, like you talk about Zoom calls on people that are online or whatever, and if a child appears, the horror in their face, do you know what I mean? Because it's like, oh shit, what's going to happen? Well, someone else will come in from nowhere and grab this child from, you know what I mean? Like, properly get involved. Whereas actually I'm like, bring in the kids, bring in the adults. I want to see like an absolute travesty going off behind them, because that is actually what life is like.
Absolutely.
You know, if you just accepted, oh, my kids just arrived, here it is, and then off it toddles, then fine, because we're all still people at the end of the day, regardless of whether they're, your parents or not. And I think if it's accepted and if it's just a case of, fine, then that will help a little bit, and people will feel less guilty almost, actually, for having that other role.
I've watched a transformation over the course of lockdown. At the beginning of lockdown, like I was on my networking meetings and stuff, and obviously there were women on there, and you could tell they were like, they're one eye on the door, because they were like, please, don't have a kid come in. And then as soon as a child came in, they'd be like, right, I've got to go. I'm sorry, I'll have to log off and come back later, because the child's home. Whereas now, like last Friday, 3 of the women in my networking group, and there are only kind of 4 or 5 of us, but 3 of them had children on their laps whilst we were doing the call, and that was just absolutely fine. It was accepted. Women are comfortable with it, and I could tell that the women were comfortable with it. How do we get men to a point where that's normal and that they're comfortable with it? Beat them with big sticks.
I don't think it's their fault. I think it's...
I'm not saying it's their fault. It's not a case of fault. I think they're not used to it. They're not used to seeing that. So how
it's not okay for them. Like if we think about, I don't know how you do it without affecting great societal change in like and also change in the media, because it is the language. It's okay to have, mums in business, mum support group. Although I did see the other day, someone on LinkedIn had set up a dads in business support group.
Yeah. Really?
But it was at 6 o'clock on a weeknight, and I thought that's bedtime. Yeah.
How do you get out of doing bath time?
I think that's a really interesting thing, because that Dad's in Business, I know who runs that, and I know some people that go along to that as well. And I actually asked the question because I'm like, okay, this is probably another podcast, but that whole women in networking, women's only groups, all of those kind of things, different conversation. But the Dad's one, I was like, how does that actually work? What is it about? And they're like, actually, it's really good because it just gives us a chance to be normal, and talk about the same things that we all have to deal with, but almost are not allowed to, I guess, in business. It comes back to that, that persona, I guess, that people put forward of how they are in business. And I think that's what affects men, I guess, really more when it comes to that kid thing, because it's like, you've got to be the stern, businessman. You've got to be able to be thrusting and dynamic and raw, and when you get kids involved that are, quite frankly, you never know what they're going to do next. Yeah. So how do you handle that? And actually, if they embarrass you or if they do something they're not supposed to, how do people handle that? I think that's
it's a very good point, though, isn't it? Because it comes back to that, this is why men need feminism as much as women need feminism. Yeah. Because we would be able to go, and it was a vital, I'm not one of these mumsy mums. I don't want to go and sit at a toddler group and talk endlessly about nappies. But sometimes you do need to have a bit of a conversation where you're like, you know what, my child did this, and it's, I just need to laugh with somebody about it, or I just need to talk to somebody about it. And I know I could go and have those conversations with quite a few women who I do business with. Whereas if you're a man, maybe you do want to shout about the fact that your child's just taking its first steps. But if you rock up at a networking group and tell people, are you going to get frowned at? So I think it is really important that men are able to have these spaces. But you're absolutely right. We come on to that question of, should they all be separate? Do women need women-only groups? Do men need men-only? And we will come back to this in a separate podcast. Yeah. Or is that perpetuating the problem? And actually, should we just have one big, everybody should be able to go everywhere and talk about their children and their business and their horses and their hair, whatever they want to talk about?
I do think at the moment, the things. At the moment, I do really feel for men as a group at the moment, because I feel like, male suicide is at an all-time high. Toxic masculinity is it is utterly toxic. And there's a real shift going on, I think, at the moment in what it means to be a man, They've been told for so long, you must be this, this and that. And now they're being expected to be something entirely different, but not being given the tools to cope with it. And I think perhaps women are used to this and have been fighting it for longer and have had more changes happen within a generation than men perhaps have. And I think they're coming up to a kind of epoch. And I think for them, that's possibly what's causing the problem, that they haven't got anywhere where they can go and be vulnerable and actually talk about the things that are affecting them and explore emotionally or intellectually what's expected of them in society. Whereas women have been doing this for, 150 years, 200 years. For men, it's quite a new thing. And I think they perhaps do need a safe space where they can go and it's okay to be vulnerable or explore their paternal side or explore their, hunter-gatherer side or whatever. But I do worry about men at the moment.
But it's true, if they do express any kind of emotion or anything like that, they get labeled snowflakes and what's the hipster, and stop being a wuss and man up, yeah, and that's still true. I mean, you see this in Facebook groups day in, day out, men who put out anything even slightly vulnerable, you just get a massive pile on from all their mates going, shut the fuck up, man up, what are you doing? Yeah. Don't be such a girl, stop fucking whining.
Yeah, and I just think I properly feel for the men folk right now. I think it's proper shit for them. And when we talk about language, don't be a pussy, don't be a fanny, man up, grow some balls. Like, it is incredibly damaging for how that portrays women, but how that impacts on their own self-image, I think.
Do you see that, Marisha? Do you see that kind of that language of man up and don't be a pussy and you must be on your period and stuff? Does that come through? You're in quite a male-dominated workplace, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. And I think
you're the one saying it.
Yeah. This is the problem. I don't know. I think there is that. I guess, I kind of have the ability to see both angles, quite frankly, in a male-dominated industry, and can chameleonize, which is my new word. I like it. I can be one or the other. If I want to be a helpless woman, or if I want to be, on the other banter male side, I can kind of get involved with both. But I agree, there is, that level of, I guess that's where I kind of excel sometimes as well, because actually being in a male-dominated environment means that I have different conversations with men in that environment, because I'm not seen as a threat, quite frankly. If we go into a conversation about stuff, it's not about, a sword fight. I can be empathetic, I can understand, I can also tell them to, pull up or whatever, but I do think I do have a different conversation. And actually, I see that, when I'm talking to people, how they react with one person versus how they react with me. But there's definitely very much male kinds of raw, especially when, in industry events, how much can you drink, and how drunk can you get, and how quickly, and how many girls can you cop off with, and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's just
Do you know? I mean, there's so much show when I've done this, when I've been at like expos or something, and you watch kind of a group of businessmen together, especially if they don't work together, especially if they've just met at the hotel and they don't meet very often. And you see that, like, they instantly go into competition mode, don't they? It's like it's the highest competition straight away. And I just think that must be exhausting, to have to feel like you've got to walk into a room and immediately start justifying your existence and being like, who's got the biggest, best feathers and stuff. It's like, that must be. Why can't you just get pissed together and have a laugh? Like, why do you find, so being the woman in that position, do you find that they will come to you to have those conversations that they perhaps couldn't have with each other?
I think it starts to happen naturally. Maybe they just find it easier to, and if you kind of track back, if you like, and I think there's definitely the, son talking to mother kind of thing that goes on in that space. And I think that it's that, when you say, well, who do you speak to when you've not got lots of people that are in the same vibe or lots of men that kind of you can relate to, it tends to be a female figure in the family in some way, shape or form. So it's that kind of vibe, really. I don't think people go out of their way to come and tell me their troubles, but they can just maybe be a bit more open in the conversation they have. But it's interesting what you say there about, a bunch of men all standing together and almost feeling like they compete, because I actually feel the opposite of that. If you go to a women's only event, fucking hell, that can be quite intense for people walking into that, and feeling that you need to be X, whatever X is. I think it's I think it works in that way as well, to be honest.
I think the thing with women's groups is because they get quite cliquey, don't they? Because women will come together and they will form a friendship quite tightly, but then because of that, you can't ever get into it. You can't, and that's what I found. I don't do women's only networking not as a rule, but I just haven't done it, and I do feel intimidated when I walk into groups of women if they already know each other, because it's hard to break into that, isn't it? So it does work both ways. What were you going to say, Hannah?
I feel like I find women's only groups, whether it's networking or business or, walking into my kids' friendship groups or whatever, I find it really intimidating not because they're cliquey, because often they won't know each other either, but because I feel like I have to be the sort of woman that I'm not naturally. Like, I'm not a very feminine kind of woman, and I have a potty mouth, and I have, political opinions, and I don't want to talk about my kid all the time, and I want to talk about something proper, and I have to dampen that hugely in a way that I don't have to when I'm standing with a group of men. And I think there's that as well. There is an expectation of what it means to be a woman, and if you don't fall straight into that, which I don't think any of us, the three of us don't, then it's very difficult, I think, to be with other women, because you're expected to be a certain type of woman. And if you let a little bit of yourself slip, like if you call someone a cunt by accident, then it's like, oh, who is this lunatic?
This is really interesting, and this is a massive area of language, isn't it? Is swearing. And for anybody who knows me, they will know that I swear like a docker, and that mainly comes from, I used to work in a garage, at a mechanic's garage in Wigan, and they all swore like troopers, and I swore like troopers then, and I've never really lost it. But it is a massive thing, isn't it? You see, when you swear, especially as a woman, I've seen men swear at meetings and nobody's batted an eyelid. But when I do it, everyone goes, oh. Or still, have you ever heard that, sorry, ladies present?
Yes.
Still do it. And you're like, what? Are we living in the 9th, 18th century? What the fuck? I've heard swear words. It's all right. I'm a grown-up. But because you're a woman, it's like, oh, I might melt. Especially the C word. Like, and I'll not use it a lot because I know some people don't like it, but I accidentally dropped it in a networking group the other week with Marisha. I meant to write count and I wrote cunt by accident because I missed out the O. And everyone was like laughing and sniggering. And then the next week, everyone was still laughing and sniggering. And they all went like, oh, I hate that. Everyone was going to hate that word. I hate that word. And I went, I love it. I use it all the time. And people like physically recoiled. And I thought, I will use it all the time because it's a derogatory term for a woman that I am reclaiming. And I can say it because to me, that is it's like bitch. And, I will call another woman a cunt or a bitch or a slag all day long, but I would never use it in front of men because that is a term that is a derogatory term to put women down. And I am reclaiming that as a friendly term. It's like the N word for African Americans. Like I'm reclaiming that word. Yeah. But to me, sorry, go on.
But I think like there's like men would not use it, and men are shocked when I use that word, and women are appalled by it. Like, why? It is just like a cunt was what a Roman sword was sheathed in. It's just another word for a slang word for a vagina. Like, let's just fucking say it.
Well, you see, to me, all words are just words.
Yeah.
I think a word only has power if you give it power, and if you don't give it power, it's just a word. Marisha, do you swear?
I swear, yes, quite a lot. Yes, you wouldn't think it to look at me, obviously, but I swear quite a lot. But I get that as well. You know, that people are very much ladies present. And I'm like, mate, I know more swear words than you just by looking at your face. It's like, you know, and but I think I also kind of swear without realizing as well. You know, it's just how I am. It's just how I
talk. Exactly.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say.
No, not really. No. I mean, there's things that I don't like the sound of. Like, I don't like a bitch, for example, but it's like, that's just a personal preference. It's not because it means anything specific or, you know, has any highlight for me. There are just words I like and words I don't, you know, same as food.
Yeah. If a man called me a bitch, I would be fucking furious. If a woman called me a bitch, especially, you know, like if it was a mate, like that's just your bitches, like I would not be bothered. So I think as well, it depends who it's coming from.
Yeah, it depends if he was saying it. If somebody called me a bitch in anger, then I would not be happy, but I wouldn't be happy because he'd used the word bitch. I would not be happy because he was angry at me. But if, again, to me, they genuinely are just words. I just don't think they have.
But it's the connotations, isn't it? Like if a man calls you a bitch, and men tend not to call other men bitches unless they're saying, oh, you're so like a woman. Yeah. You're being bitchy, or you're being a real little bitch. Yeah, they're fucking likening you to a dog. Like, you know, you're just the lowest, you're just a lowly little animal, just some lowly animal. Like, no.
Tell you what, we are coming up to time, but just very quickly, as we're talking about language today, we haven't even got on to clothing. We'll have to do a whole nother one on clothing. But anyway, language, the term lady just drives me insane. Now, you see, this is where I'm going to contradict myself here. As I say, words don't have any meaning. The term lady, if somebody calls me a lady, I hate it. And yet I'm in the Seroptimists, just drop it into everything I do. And they always refer to each other as ladies. You know, hello, ladies. Here you go, ladies. And I just hate it because it just, and I've taught Leon to say, like, because, you know, when you're a little boy and people say, oh, say thank you to the nice lady. And I've always said to Leon, like, never call me a lady. I'm not a lady. Do not call me that. So he knows now that he's not allowed to do that. But that whole thing of, you know, ladies present, I'm instantly like, there ain't no ladies here. Like,
it just gives a connotation of some weak-willed, lily-livered layabout, like sniffing of smelling salts and reclining onto chaise lounges and absolutely fucking useless. And like, the connotation is horrendous. Or like ladylike, be ladylike. No, piss off. I am ladylike because I am a woman, and therefore, by definition, I am ladylike. Yeah. So I always teach Naya, like I'll say thank you to the nice woman. Oh, yeah. I'll never say lady. How do you feel about ladies, Marisha?
No, I don't think I've ever got as angry as you girls. I love it. It's like whatever I say is offensive even on this call. I don't really have any issue with lady. I really dislike hun. Hi, hun.
Hun.
Hi, hun. And it's like, I think my main issue is more when people are affectionate with me when they shouldn't be, or if I don't know them enough for you to be affectionate with me. I'm not your darling, mate. It's an email list. This is not a darling territory.
Right, darling.
You're right, darling. I don't know how I turn into a cockney then. Do you know what I mean? It's my issue is more about that, and how well I know people, actually, and how they address me as opposed to the word itself.
See, that's really funny because I'm the opposite. Like, I know if somebody calls me like darling or love or duck or whatever, I know it's just a figure of their speech, so that doesn't offend me. But then I get really worked if somebody says lady, I'll get really worked up. So isn't it interesting how subjective that is, and how how we react to the language that is used against us is completely personal. It depends on our personal points of views and our own histories and stuff. There's no hard and fast rule at all, is there?
And it's so emotional. I used to work with a bloke who called me doll. I hit the fucking roof, doll. I absolutely hated that. He only did it once or twice. I was like, I am not a doll. I am not just here for enjoyment.
You cannot blow me up.
I never even thought about that. I don't like a porcelain doll, not a sex doll, Rachel.
Right, okay, yeah, well,
I could have done that if you'd have wanted.
Sex toys. Right, and on that note, we're 3 minutes over time. Girls, I'm gonna you get mad when people call you girls. So thank you so much to both of you again. That's been really interesting. I say again, loads of stuff that we haven't even touched on there, but it is really interesting when you think about language and language in the workplace and how we use it. And we use it without thinking, and the words that we say can have such a massive effect on other people without us even realizing it, can't they? So we should probably all think about what comes out of our mouths, really, shouldn't we?
We should really, shouldn't we?
No, that's never going to happen, is it?
Yeah. We're never going to do that, are we? Right. On that note, have a good day.